WOCA. Ocala.
All right, 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. I am a fan of music, Robin. I wasn't sure whether to say I was a fan of rock and roll or just a fan of music. When I look back on the music that I've evolved through, I don't know if I've evolved or it has evolved, but when you look back at like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and Elvis and Bill Haley and Chuck Berry and Little Richard, and you say that it's all rock and roll, everything's rock and roll. Yesterday by the Beatles, that's considered rock and roll. It's in the rock and roll rack, right?
Yeah.
Or what? And Kiss, the song Beth. Remember Beth?
Oh, I love that
That's
song.
rock and roll. Oh yeah, it's done by a rock and roll artist. It's an interesting genre because it has so many different music pieces, I guess, that you might question whether it is rock and roll. And I don't know how to define it. I've never really known. Chris Formant is on the phone, and I understand that you and his publicist have teamed up to Noel to ask us questions, right?
Yep.
Oh my gosh! Chris. Good morning, Chris.
Oh boy,
Chris. How are you? Good morning, Chris. How are you?
That's not what I signed up for.
Oh, you didn't? Well, somewhere along the way, Robin has. Good morning, Chris. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Larry. And good morning, Robin.
Let me do your introduce. You've written a book called Bright Midnight. This is a thriller novel, and this is you've taken rock and roll history and just flipped it upside down. And although maybe you're onto something in a few cases, I don't know. Anyway,
I loved it.
You're on the board of trustees for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I'm going to talk to you about Melanie Safka. I know she wants to be in the Hall of Fame so bad. He's a researcher, a student of rock and roll, and I think that's where Noel and Robin got together and said, "Ooh, let's conspire against Chris and Larry to see if who knows more." I'm guessing you know more, so I'm going to just give you that.
No, I doubt it.
Well, anyway, good morning. How are you? Where are you? Where are you calling from? Where are you?
Today I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. I have we're on our publicity tour. I've got a local station to do a live interview with, and then I have an event this evening, and then we move down to DC after that.
So the other day somebody posted on my Facebook page a picture of record racks. Remember record racks when albums were vinyl and everything?
Yeah.
And the question was, how many of you spent hours in one of these places? And I raised my hand virtually and said, yep, I was there doing that. Mm-hmm. Was that you too when you were younger? Were you in those record stores?
Yeah. I still have quite a vinyl collection, even though I don't have a turntable to operate them on now. But I've got quite a vinyl record and CD collection, and we don't play CDs either.
Yeah, well, and
we're dinosaurs.
And the reason
the
reason I went there first in this discussion with you is because that was the only way we really had any information about the people singing and playing music on those records.
Yeah.
There was no MTV. Yeah. The guys on the radio, all they basically told you was that's the name of the song and that's the name of the band and let's do a commercial, right?
Right.
Yeah, and it was very managed. I mean, one of the things that intrigued me about writing a fictional rock and roll murder mystery, and it's a CSI. Bright Midnight is a CSI murder mystery. That reimagines the deaths of late '60s and '70s iconic rock stars as not as overdoses or accidents, but as murders. One of the reasons is that it was such a concentrated. You just touched upon it. Such a concentrated industry. A handful of people around the globe really controlled the industry and controlled all the talent.
Yeah, that's true. But in the beginning. Probably before Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Brian Jones, probably before them, but going back to like the Chuck Berry days, it was not yet established as a big moneymaker, and so therefore it was a little bit more untamed. But when the big money came into the picture, then it started changing it, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, the guys that in that era, and still in the '60s, I mean, the people that were in control of the future of the artists were really the disc jockeys. You know, they had the audience, they had the franchise.
That's
and
true. Yeah.
You know, I hope we get back to that a little bit, but it was a much more democratic. Then it got concentrated, and now with the internet, you've got a very sort of democratic distribution again.
You know, I've been doing radio long enough that this doesn't happen anymore. But in the early days of my doing radio, which would have been the mid '80s, we still had guys. Even though payola was made against the law, it was outlawed. We still had guys giving us tickets and dinners, and they were sweetened. They couldn't give money anymore, but they would give you stuff.
Right.
And of course, the whole thing was, well, you're going to play the record, right? Yeah. And keep in mind, I'm not in a big market. This is a very small market here. So if they were reaching to us small time radio guys, I can't even imagine what they were doing for like Bruce Morrow.
Yeah.
Bruce Morrow, was that the guy's name? Bruce Morrow?
Yes.
Up in New York? But you know,
Uncle Brucey.
Uncle Brucey, yeah.
Uncle Brucey.
Yeah,
Right.
I can't imagine what those guys were being offered.
Yeah, don't know.
So tell me. So let's talk about the story. So well, let me ask you this: do you think any of them might have been murdered? For real?
Yes, I do. And you know, I had heard about the myth of 27, the Club of 27. You know, and I just I thought it was just that, just a myth. You know, sort of a hippie myth, and it was kind of new agey kind of thing. It's sort of myth. I mean, there wasn't anything to connect them, but when I started doing the research, and when the idea struck me that maybe this wasn't, I collect rock and roll memorabilia, and obviously and have a strong affiliation for it, but once I have a lot of memorabilia on many of these stars, but once after I read the Da Vinci Code years ago, I started thinking, what would happen if this didn't happen the way it's been reported? And as I researched them, they're very controversial. And some of them didn't have autopsies. When they did have autopsies, they were very flimsy. I had a top neurosurgeon from Johns Hopkins medicine, that hospital, that helped me analyze them. And when you started looking at them and looking at it through the eyes of a 21st century investigative reporter, or applying 21st century forensic tools, it was pretty crude back then in the late 60s and 70s. And it wouldn't have taken a whole lot to interpret them, and it didn't for me, interpret them as different types of deaths and not overdoses or accidents.
Wow.
And that was kind of the seed. And I think that so and no one's ever written a mystery about this genre before.
And for the And for the listening audience, we're talking about some of the greats like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Jim Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? You have Peter Ham on the list. We're referring to the guy from Badfinger, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Now I'm guessing most people don't know that name, but I remember it well because I was a Beatles fan, and so anybody who was on Apple Records became of interest to me, and I was really saddened when I found out that he killed himself. But in your book, he doesn't kill himself.
Well, he dies.
Okay.
Yeah. The interesting thing is his partner, his co-writing partner with Badfinger, died, killed himself about a year after Peter died. And so some of this is, the thing that got me going was not just doing the research, and I was lucky. Because of my affiliation with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I got into the archives and got into some of the original handwritten files, editor and writer files from at Rolling Stone magazine. So I could get a sense of the emotion and the tenor at that time, and see it in their own handwriting, and then listen to some cassette tapes. And these guys were really enemies of the state at that time. they were, it was, that they weren't friends of the police, friends of the FBI, friends of Scotland Yard. I mean, they were trying to deport them. If they lived in, those that lived in the United States, they were being set up, constantly.
Wow.
And, there's a dark side of what was occurring at the time.
And that leads up to one of the questions Noel sent me. Badfinger had a small role in perhaps the first big rock charity concert, but Pete Ham stepped into the spotlight to help perform what song?
Is it the concert for Bangladesh?
Yep.
Was that the concert?
Yep, that's the concert.
So, so the song would have been the George Harrison song, of course.
Was it Bangladesh?
Was
No.
it?
Was it
Okay.
from Bangladesh?
Yep.
Here Comes the Sun.
Yep, an acoustic version.
Oh,
Ding, ding, ding.
Sun.
All right, I got one.
there you go. Yeah, there you go.
I got one.
And the opening of Bright Midnight, the first page that takes place in 1967 in Reading, England. It's actually a true account of a concert in Reading, England, by a group called the Ivies. Okay, the Ivies were what Badfinger was called before Paul McCartney got a hold of them.
Oh, really?
He changed he changed it to Badfinger because he wanted the Ivies didn't sound too hip, and he thought Badfinger sounded hip.
Oh, wow. I never see. That's something I never knew.
And Peter Ham was an exceptional musician, rock musician, but McCartney had him record some of his pop songs, so he never really got a chance. He was pretty frustrated. He never really got a chance. He was being compared as a guitarist to Jimi Hendrix at the time. He was that
really
good, but he never got a chance to really perform.
I've seen James Taylor in interviews talks about how happy he was to get away from Apple. Not that he didn't appreciate the catapulting into fame that it gave him, but he was really freer when he went. What did he go to Warner Brothers? I think after Apple, and so I often wondered if there wasn't some kind of a pressure that Badfinger felt just by being a Beatles label band.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Paul McCartney was their producer and George Harrison. So you can hear in their music sort of a Beatlesque, more of McCartney, style.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And then there's another question about Jimi Hendrix. He had a family reunion before one of his concerts in a Canadian city. Which city and why?
Wait, say it again, Jimi. What was it?
Let's see. I would guess it would be Vancouver.
What was your?
Yep, that's it. Jimi Hendrix had a family reunion before one of his concerts in a Canadian city. Which city and why? Vancouver was right.
I wouldn't have known that one.
And the reason?
The reason? What was the reason?
Yeah.
It was family reunion, right?
Yeah.
Because it's close to Seattle.
It was a family reunion, but he dedicated the concert to his grandmother, 84 years old, because she was not impressed by his music.
She was not
impressed.
Wow, your publicist knows a lot about this stuff, it sounds like, Chris.
Wow, I'm going to have to talk to her about it.
All right, let me take a look.
I thought there'd be hard ones like name all four Beatles.
You know what? There was one story I was watching not too long ago that, who was the guy? Stuart Sutcliffe, that was John Lennon's friend before they became famous.
Right.
That his brain hemorrhage that caused him to die was actually caused by John Lennon fighting with him in the alley or something like that. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah, I mean, the account I heard was not John Lennon. It was they were jumped in an alley in Germany, and someone kicked him in the head. They were both jumped.
Yeah, and I had heard that too, but I had heard something recently that it was John Lennon who was the one who kicked him in the head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, here's another question then. Which Rolling Stone band member performed on 2 Beatles singles, and what are the names of the record titles?
Mick Jagger, right?
It's got to be Mick Jagger.
Let's see. No.
Keith Richards?
No. It was Brian Jones. He sang backing vocals on Yellow Submarine in 1966, and he played saxophone on You Know My Name, the B-side of Let It Be.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good song.
Larry, I think you and I better ask the question going forward.
Well, Noelle was so excited about this, and I joined her.
Look at my number. Remember that song? Oh my gosh. Do you know what? I when I was young, a month ago, I was in New York City with my son, and that's where I grew up. And so I was like taking him to all these places, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I remember this, I remember that." The one thing I had a real clear memory of was going to the Village with a friend, the Greenwich Village, and my friend loved to go to these hole-in-the-wall record stores that had these albums like, what was the one with the naked pictures of John and Yoko?
Fantasy, double fantasy.
Two virgins.
Double.
Two virgins.
Two virgins.
Double fantasy.
Right?
Okay.
Wasn't that what's called Life with the Lions or something like that? Oh my gosh! And we'd come home and listen to these records, and they were like, "This, what is this? This is crazy stuff." Yoko was screaming, and oh wow, the book is.
I think Larry, in the book, one of the main characters owns one of those sort of dustbin, vinyl, record stores in the Village.
Really? Well, I remember spending hours in there, and I remember the guy sitting at the cash register had a record player, and he would just play records, and we were just young guys with not much money, but a lot of time, and I'd be just reading these liner notes, listening to whatever he was playing. That's where I first heard, Paul Kantner, Blows Against the Empire. Do you remember that album, Paul Kantner, when the Jefferson Airplane broke up?
Yeah.
Oh,
remember
okay.
that? Yeah. All right. Sorry.
And
you're a young guy. I'm looking at your picture. Look at you. You're not that old.
You had commissioned someone to do the artwork for your cover.
Yes, and that's really one of the fun things. And the publishers really didn't. They wanted me to go with more traditional cover, and I wanted something that was pretty authentic. So I teamed up with a artist named David Singer. David is one of the last surviving Fillmore West poster artists. He's very famous, museum quality guy, and he did a lot of rock covers. David did work for the Stones. He still does some work for Paul McCartney, but the Stones, Grateful Dead, some of the most iconic rock posters that have ever been done. David loved the story. He said, I'd love to do this for you, and he did. And we crafted a cover that has a lot going on. It's probably, once you read the book, some of it clarifies, but you can see the bright midnight, the midnight moon on it, the psychedelic lettering, the blood in the water. Something's going on, it's a beautiful piece of art. And he's just done. I have our formal. The book just came out November 8th, and so it's selling very well, and we're getting great reviews. Our formal sort of debut, if you will, launch will take place December 8th at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and David's coming in from California, and he and I, along with the Rock Hall, are going to talk about the book. And he has crafted a cover, a poster that looks like the cover, but with Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Chris Formant debut, sort of around the sides. So we've converted it into a concert poster, which we'll be giving out.
That's awesome. Where's the title come from? Bright Midnight.
Bright Midnight is a line from. You should know this. It's a line from a song on the first Doors album called "End of the Night." If you remember that song, it's a very sort of sultry song. It's on their first album, and it refers to a sort of a flash in the pan, a meteoric, just temporary event, that just occurs for an instant, and that's what these rock stars were. And it actually is Jim Morrison wrote the lyrics to that song, and he lifted the lyrics from a William Blake poem.
Oh wow!
And,
I didn't know any of that.
That's the derivation, and so it's actually the song is actually a very beautiful piece of poetry.
Chris Formant is our guest. The book is called Bright Midnight, and if you're a rock and roll lover, or just a great, if you like good books, this is you've taken the Da Vinci Code approach, taken history and kind of rewritten it. But the problem with that is, I'm gonna at the end of this, I'm gonna be confused in my brain, which is real and which is the Da Vinci Code version.
That's what I was hoping for.
Yeah, that's what happens, I think, and maybe some of it is true. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you know gosh, what was I going to say now? I don't know what I was going to say.
I do another question here.
Okay, right.
This is about what nasty incident at the University of Texas scarred Janis Joplin for life?
Wow, nasty incident.
Yep.
Was she raped?
No.
Was it a protest?
No.
Oh gosh, you stumped both of us.
It said one of the fraternities at the University of Texas voted Janis the ugliest man on campus in 1961. She was devastated and left the school without graduating.
People are so mean. Really?
That's mean. That's very mean.
That is so mean. Wow.
Yeah. Very mean.
Wow.
Very mean. And that's one of the wonderful things about the writing in your book. I mean, you're respecting everyone, and you've always got alternatives for what's going on with the different characters.
So
I mean, it takes place today. So it's looking back. So the little vignettes. My kids read the book, and what they appreciated was they didn't know. They just hear, these, so and so died of a drug overdose. They didn't know the personalities. They had no way of knowing the personalities, nor sort of the history and the environment at the time that these things occurred. And I tried to sort of infuse it with little vignettes. I had a former editor of Rolling Stone magazine who knew some of these people and has written about them. And I asked him. He helped me, really try to show the personality of each of the rock stars in those little vignettes, so you could tell quickly,
really?
How cerebral Morrison was, and how joking, what a perfectionist and what a jokester Jimi Hendrix was, and you don't bring, none of that stuff is brought out because you see these as beautiful musicians, but people have died from overdoses, and not as these true Renaissance, poets and musicians.
It is so sad when you think about it, because had they lived, you don't know what kind of music they would be making and what would have happened. Wow, it's just so sad. I mean, even with John Lennon, it's been like 30-something years already, right? For John Lennon?
Yeah.
And it says, what childhood trauma affected Jim Morrison so badly that he wrote about it on several occasions with the Doors?
Oh, that's an easy one. He drove past an accident where a number of Indians, it was either in Arizona or Utah, where it was a horrible accident where people were lying dead on the side of the road.
Wow.
Yeah,
right?
It says he was
He
said it was 4 years old in 1947, and he referred to this incident on the Doors song Peace Frog in 1970.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you know that Jim Morrison, on the cover of Bright Midnight, turned on its side is a bust.
Yeah.
A marble bust.
Yeah.
That actually is the bust of Alexander the Great that's on display at the Acropolis Museum in Athens. Jim Morrison thought he was Alexander the Great reincarnated.
He looks like him.
He does. Well, he did that on purpose. He wore his hair the same. He held his head the same. He copied his look and his mannerisms. He tried to copy from Alexander the Great.
Oh,
so he thought that he was reincarnated. Yeah, and so I used that. So the geeky musicologist will pick that one.
I love that.
May pick that one up.
Well, now I know it.
Yeah.
Now I'm in the geek.
now you know it.
Chris Formant, thank you so much for being on.
Oh, thank you.
Bright Midnight is the book. I have a copy. Call me if you want the copy. The rest of us have to go buy it. Is your website the best way to do this?
Yeah, you can go to chrisformant.com or go on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. They're all carrying it, in Kindle and ebook. and in iBooks or just the regular hard copies.
All right.
You're amazing.
Thank you so much for being on the air.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you more about the Hall of Fame. Melanie Safko, put her in the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
We'll be. Thank you, Chris. We'll be right back.
Donald Trump says he alone knows who the finalists are for top White House jobs as the transition process continues. Former rival Ted Cruz, according to some reports, is being considered for Attorney General. But Fox's Doug McKelway says...
We're hearing from some of our sources within the transition team to take that with a grain of salt. And you have to harken back to this tremendous animosity